Hello there. Welcome to another burst session focusing on computational fluency. Today's burst session is going to focus on the use of math games to support the development of computational fluency in our kindergarten through grade 5 classrooms. My name is Janice Nowakoski, and I am the district teacher consultant for mathematics and numeracy from kindergarten through grade 12 in the Richmond School District. So this new series is focusing on computational fluency and how we develop that across the grades through different experiences. And again, we'll just start with defining what is computational fluency. And again, computation is the calculation of numbers using the operations of addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. And the most commonly used definition of computational fluency is students and adults having efficient, flexible, and accurate methods for computing. So computational fluency isn't about just getting the answer, although accurate solutions are of course important, but it's also being efficient in how we do that and also being flexible in our thinking so that we might choose different operations or different strategies or approaches dependent on what the numbers that are presented are. And so that's where number sense comes into play. And when we look at our big idea in mathematics from kindergarten through grade 9 in our BC curriculum, it says that computational fluency develops from a strong sense of number. So children really understanding our number system, the place value system, and then moving into decimals and the intermediate grades and then fractions as well, before they operate on them, having that real strong, solid sense of that number and how those numbers are related to each other is really important before students start to operate with them. In our curriculum, we look at addition and subtraction together, beginning formally in grade 1, and then developing over the years through grade 5. So that computational fluency really focuses on those basic facts up to 20. And then as students get into grade 3 and 4 and 5, they're connecting their understanding of those basic facts to larger numbers. So adding 2 and 3 and 4 and 5-digit numbers, and then also adding and subtracting decimal numbers as well. And as you can see on that continuum, that the description of emerging and developing and extending computational fluency was included in the math curriculum long before the proficiency scales were developed in BC, but it was used to describe how each year you're further developing students' understanding of their math facts, their recall of them, and then their use of other math facts to figure out new math facts that they don't know. So using the known facts to figure out the unknown facts. And then that's also similar for multiplication and division, which begins formally in grade 3 and then has that 5 years of development until grade 7. So that we're all responsible, grade 1 through grade 7, with students' development of those basic addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division facts. So again, that's just sort of the overview of computational fluency and how it is situated in our BC mathematics curriculum. Math games are one of many instructional strategies that we can use to support the development of computational fluency. And again, whenever we're choosing an instructional strategy or an approach, we want to make sure that that is research-based or evidence-based in terms of what it is offering and supporting student learning, because that's why we do things, is to support student learning. So drawing upon decades of research on math games, whether they're hands-on math games or digital math games, it's important that we're using math games as deliberate practice for learning math, that the math needs to be central to the game. So math can't sort of just be like a side effect or a tangential part of the game. When we're using it as a deliberate practice, a form of deliberate practice in our classrooms, we need to make sure that math is central to that particular game. The research also talks about when we have mixed groups, which is what most of our classrooms are, even when working with small groups, that there has to, math games need to involve both content, so that knowledge piece and those competencies, as well as some sort of luck, so that there's some randomness involved, such as using cards and dice and spinners. And that makes it a more equitable and full learning experience for all the children that are engaging with the math games. And then for math games to actually be effective practice, students need to have maybe a mini lesson or some specific explicit instruction before they play the math games. It could be a review of a particular strategy or about, a number like the place value system or about decimals, whatever it is that you're wanting them to practice. You might need to do some instruction around that before, again, having them practice the games. And then also time for the students to reflect on their strategies and their math learning after they've played the game. So it's not just, oh, play that game for 20 minutes. We want to set them up for success by, activating that prior knowledge about the math or the strategies, and maybe doing a bit of review. And then also bringing them together and maybe sharing, oh, when you were playing, um, addition face off today, what strategies were you using? What strategies were you using when you got numbers over 10, the queens and the jacks and the kings, and have students share their strategies so they're learning from each other and consolidating their understanding of those addition strategies. So those are some really important things to include when you're using math games in your classroom. So in thinking about those core number concepts that we're developing from grade 1 through grade 7, place value, and then the related concepts with decimals, because decimals start in grade 4. And if they don't understand the place value system on the left of the decimal point, they're going to have difficulties with the right of the decimal point. So playing games such as place the digit, digit place, place value face off, and star 99 or 999 are all, games that focus on the math and the concept of place value, but are in a structured game type of approach to that practice. And so all of those games, I'll show you where you can find. If you don't know those games, there's videos and there's instruction sheets for all those games on the district math blog, the district YouTube channel, as well as on the portal. Some games specific to computational fluency that I use in rotation across the grades are addition, subtraction, and multiplication face-off. Division doesn't work so well, depending on the group of students that you have. But face-off, when I grew up, it was called war. But I'm like, we don't need any more war in the world. Let's call this face-off. And that could be, hockey related. That idea that you are turning two cards over, adding them together, and whoever has the greatest sum wins the cards. Again, you could do 2-digit plus 1 digit or 2 digits plus 3 digits. The students can set up the criteria with their partner or their triad, or you could set the criteria for what you want them to practice. Same for multiplication. Again, in terms of practicing 2-digit by 1 digit or just single-digit multiplication, etc. Salute is that great game where it's played in triads and two students hold up the cards to their foreheads, and the other student, the third student, determines the sum or determines the product by either multiplying or adding those numbers. And then the students that are standing opposite of each other have to figure out the missing, what number they have on their forehead because they can't see it. And so there's algebraic thinking embedded in that. And then it really emphasizes the relationship between addition and subtraction, and then the relationships between multiplication and division. So those are my main practice games. And then Race to 100 or 0 practices that 2-digit addition and subtraction. You could play it to Race to 1,000 and do 3-digit addition and subtraction. Circles and Stars is always the game I use in grade 3 to introduce multiplication. And then the Somewhat Dice game and Shut the Box games are similar. And again, there's instructions for them on the blog and on the portal. But those games really help students practice their fluency and their flexibility with thinking about numbers, because they have to be strategic in what add-ins or what factors they flip over or turn over. And they have to think about what numbers are available to them, etc. And then it also, again, emphasizes the relationships between addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division as well. And again, all the information for those is available, and I'll share those sources with you. So some different ways to use games in the classroom: as an opening or exploration, for regular, repeated, deliberate, and intentional practice. So again, if you're focusing on practicing multiplication facts that particular week or expanding students' understanding of multiplication, you might have a couple multiplication games out as a choice during math workshop, or if you do stations or centers, however you structure your classroom. For formative assessment purposes, to get information as you're circulating and listening in on students' gameplay, pausing them every once in a while and say, oh, how did you figure that out? And having them share their thinking and their strategies. For application and consolidation of understanding, it could be a choice for practice or extending their learning. And it really helps to develop gameplay, really helps to develop those core competencies of both communication and collaboration. and give students an opportunity to take turns, to listen to each other, to build on each other's ideas, explain their thinking, because sometimes students will disagree. Oh, no, you didn't get it right. And then they have to justify why their answer was correct. And that is sort of built into gameplay as well. And then a collection of math games is always great to have on hand when a family or a parent or a guardian asks for some math practice at home. And I used to have baggies in my classroom with the instructions and a deck of cards or dice or counters or whatever was needed. And I would have a tub of those, and I could send those home with children either because they wanted to or if their families were requesting something to do at home to practice their math. So when we think of the three-part math lesson, thinking about, opening a lesson could begin with a game, games out on the table that students are just using for practice. You could use that opening, 10 minutes or so to introduce and teach a new math game to the whole class, whether you're doing that on the screen or, together in tables or in a circle on the carpet. That middle time is really that intentional practice time where you're, providing a choice of a few different games that they can choose from to practice a particular concept that you're working on. And then that closing part of the lesson is when students can discuss, what game they played, whether they won or not, and what their strategies were, and what it helped them practice, and getting them to be metacognitive and reflective about how games are another form of practice and that they're doing math when they're playing games. So here's an example of a week plan, and this is from the portal as an example of how math games might fit into a week plan. So this whole week is focusing on decomposing numbers or decomposing quantities, but you can see on Tuesdays and Thursdays and on Friday, there's that choice of that make 10 or 20 game using 10 frames, and then extending that as well on Thursday to using a digital app. To play essentially the same game. So those are, again, one of the students' choices to practice this big idea of decomposing quantities. So some of those games, like Make 10, they're just kind of made up games. You just call it a game. So the first one, for kindergarten and grade 1 is Show It. And so I might hold out or call up a number card or use a spinner or hold up a 10 frame, that is already filled in, and then students copy that or represent it on their 10 frame. And then a more independent game that might be at a center or table is Roll It, Build It, Say It. So they roll the dice, they build it on the 10 frame, and then they say the number. And so there's that subitizing piece where they recognize the dot pattern on the dice, and then they build it on the 10 frame. So they're using that 5 and 10 base structure. And then they're saying the number name and connecting that to the visuals that they have in front of them, which is similar to the Make 10. So they roll the dice. And then maybe 6, and then they say how many more to make 10. And same with Race to 20. They roll the dice and they keep adding on until they fill up 2 10 frames to make 20. And your grade 1 students can start recording their equations, because that's part of the grade 1 curriculum in terms of recording the addition equation for each roll to make 20. You could also race to 0 backwards from 20 to practice subtraction and counting back. So here's just some examples of math games during math workshop. And that math workshop structure is really creating that opportunity for you to be able to work with small groups. So you're giving opportunities or choices for students to choose games or an app or other math tasks that they can do independently. So you're not teaching a new game at this time. It's games they already know to play that you've put out that's really, focused practice, but that students can do independently or with a partner. And then a great extension to gameplay is having students make their own games. So once they've played games for a while and sort of understand, that there's a sequence of rules that we're going to, instructions that we're going to outline before we play the game, and how someone wins or how you keep track of scoring and all those things, and I just put out different kinds of dice and, places for them to record how to play the game, and they might do a board game and draw that out and use counters for that. So this was just one option for students. This is an example when I was a teacher librarian with a grade 4 or 5 class that would come in, and we would do math in the library as part of their library time. And we did a whole series of boxcars decimal games because they were learning about decimals. And then they wrote their own, as part of that procedural writing, they wrote their own math game instructions related to decimals. And so did, step 1, step 2, step 3, what materials do you need? What math concepts is this practicing? And then they wrote those out And then we published them in a little book that then circulated in the library. So they called it Snazzy Decimal Games. And we took a photograph of each of, the games as well to go along with their instructions. Slahal is another extension in terms of gameplay, and it's a local indigenous stick and bone game that involves probability and chance and uncertainty and chances of things happening or not happening and counting. So there's lots of mathematics embedded in cultural games as well, and students could bring games from their families or their cultures to share as well. There's many videos available online if you're curious about playing Slahal. And Musqueam Language and Culture Department has a Slahal book, which is part of the Musqueam teaching kit. So you can access it through the Museum of Anthropology website at UBC. And then, I think it's a great idea. Pre-pandemic, we used to do this a lot in the district, was family math nights, whether that was a particular class or a whole school that had been focusing on computational fluency. The examples here from Bing and from Tomset, who both had this as a focus. And then, sort of at the end of a couple of years of professional learning focus and trying these things in classrooms, we had family math nights to celebrate all these math games that the children had learned across the grades. So each teacher would set up a table with games that the students already knew how to play, and then the students would teach their parents. And they got a package to go home with the instructions for the game, a deck of cards. I can't remember, maybe some dice as well. And then we usually built in some sort of, estimation, activity and a math story or something as well. So here's another, these are examples from Tomset. And you can see the math game set out on the tables, and then the children just either found tables or places on the gym floor to play with their families. Tomset had theirs after school. They thought that's when they were going to get the most families out, as was at school pickup time, whereas Bing did theirs, just slightly after dinner in the evening. So something to think about in terms of, that sort of team approach to we're all working towards this together to support the children in our schools and bringing the families into that conversation as well. So where to find some resources and support for math games? Again, when you go to the portal, and the portal will still be in existence during 2024 until August. And you go to K-2 Numeracy Foundations or grades 3 to 5 Numeracy Foundations. If you click on either Number Sense or Computational Fluency within the framework, you will see math games as a suggested instructional strategy, as well as some examples and where to find math games on both of those pages. Here's the computational fluency example. And then those all link to this particular tile, which is underneath the frameworks on the portal. There's a whole tile just for math games. And you can see here the first link is this whole list of math games that many of these videos were created during the pandemic to support families and teachers who were teaching and learning from home. So there's that list there, and you can just click on those. There's videos and instruction sheets. There's the YouTube channel, which again, there's the 2020 YouTube channel, which I created during the pandemic with district videos for math games. And then the BC Regio Inspired Math Network in 2022 did a math game of the month. So for those of you that teach K-2 or K-3, there's a new math game each month, and this kind of instruction sheet with some visuals and the math content and competencies each game practices. And this is again what they look like in terms of the instructions. Some of them are really detailed and talk to you about the connections between the mathematics curriculum, the content, and the competencies. And then like the Somewhat Dice game, here's all these different extensions for how to play it in different ways. So the whole class can be playing the Somewhat Dice game, but depending on where the students are, they might be practicing just addition, or they might be practicing all 4 operations, or you could extend the numbers beyond 9 to 12 and use 3 dice instead of 2 dice. But there's lots of different ways that you can extend many of these games. And then some more places to find math games. Again, the district blog, the district portal, the Regio Inspired math project as well. Boxcars in One Eye Jacks is a Canadian company. Many of you will be familiar with them. We have them regularly come to our district to do after school workshops, and many of our math storage rooms in our schools are full of their cards and their dice sets. And then there's a wonderful book called Math Fact Fluency. It's a purple book. Some of you might be familiar with that. And they have a website that is full of math games and links to videos to watch those games and instruction sheets as well. So that's another source of some new games if you're looking for some new games. Again, the boxcars and one-eyed jacks, many of you will be familiar with these. There's the shakers at the top right there. And we have shaker kits for both primary and intermediate at the DRC. So you can get kits that have all a class set of 30 shakers, as well as books with all sorts of games that you can play. And again, really focusing on number sense and computational fluency. And then finally, as we come to the end of our session here, just some questions for you to reflect upon and think about in terms of your next steps. How could you include math games during your week as a form of regular practice to support computational fluency? In what ways could you have students reflect on their learning, set goals, and choose math games to support their learning? So being more instead of just choosing, oh, I like this game, I'm going to play that, and having students say, oh yeah, I really need to practice, subtraction. Maybe I'm going to choose this game. And then what thinking and connecting strategies could you use to support students' consolidation of math learning after playing math games? So is it a turn and talk with a partner? Is it, I used to do this and now I do this, or, this is something new that I learned, or this is a strategy that I'm going to try next time, and that sort of math goal setting. So connecting to what they've done before and what new learning is, and then what's next for their learning. So I hope you've got some new ideas for using math games in your classrooms and know where to access some of our math game resources in the Richmond School District. Thank you for joining me.